CNN reports that the acting U.S. Deputy, Secretary of State Victoria Nuland meets with military junta members in Niger. This was following, of course, the coup of the country's pro-Western government. So we will read a little bit from this article here. This is from the CNN piece. Acting Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland met with some of the members of the military junta in Niger on Monday, a significant diplomatic push to restore democratic rule in what has been a key U.S. partner nation. Nuland met with General Moussa Salah Barmou, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, the self-proclaimed chief of defense, and 3 colonies supporting him for more than 2 hours for, quote, extremely frank and at times quite difficult conversations, she said. Nuland is the highest level U.S. official to meet in person with the military putschists. I hope I'm saying that right, too. Her trip to the capital city of Niamey...
Fucking ugly American, man.
This is a hard one. This is a hard one. Made at the request of Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, comes less than 2 weeks after members of Niger's presidential guard seized power and a day after the deadline set by the Economic Community of West African States for the military junta to restore democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum to power or risk a military intervention. Nuland told reporters Monday that the U.S. kept open the door to continue talking and urged Barmou and his allies to hear our offer to try and work with them to solve this diplomatically, and return to constitutional order. Quote, I hope they will keep the door open to diplomacy. We made that proposal, Nuland said. Their ideas do not comport with the Constitution, and that would be difficult in terms of our relationship if that's the path they take. Yeah.
Well, that would be a first.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But we gave them a number of options to keep talking, and we hope they take us up on that. These sound like threats. This sounds very Putin-esque to me. I don't know. Is anybody getting Putin vibes from this? Sounds like we're getting ready to interfere, perhaps forcefully, perhaps violently, in the internal affairs of a sovereign nation. I thought we cared a lot about national sovereignty, although it was Victoria Nuland who helped coup the sovereign government of Ukraine 9 years ago, and now she's helped staving off a coup, which is backed by about 80% of the people of Niger. Right, fuck the EU, Nuland. Nuland noted that she was not granted a meeting with the self-proclaimed new leader of Niger, General, oh man, that's a hard one. I'm not even going to try that one.
Abdurrahmani Tiani.
Abdurrahmani Tiani. There you go. That's actually a nice name. So we were left to have to depend
now
on
I know
Mr.
what I'm
Barmou.
naming my fourthborn.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we were left to have to depend on Mr. Barmou to make clear again what is at stake. The U.S. was pushing for a negotiated solution in Niger, Nuland explained. Again, it all sounds quite familiar, right? But, quote, it was not easy to get traction there because the putschists are quite firm in their view of how they want to proceed. Yeah, that's why they couped the government, because they were quite firm in how they wanted to proceed.
That takes a certain amount of conviction.
Takes some conviction, exactly. That's not like a first resort. That's kind of the last resort, right? Nuland said she was frank about what is at risk if they do not reverse course, and that she explained very clearly that the U.S.'s legal responsibilities if the military takeover is formally declared a coup, telling them that, quote, it is not our desire to go there, but they may push us to that point. One more slide. Nuland's request to see detained President Bazoum while in Niamey was denied, she told reporters Monday. So she was denied access to both the former coup president and the current president. She basically got told to go get her fucking shine box, right? We've talked to him on the phone, but we haven't seen him, she said. And so she goes on, we also asked for some gestures of health and welfare. He is in a very difficult situation under virtual house arrest, along with his son and his wife. I hope over the coming period, the people responsible for the current situation will come back to those requests, she added. She was able to meet with, quote, a broad cross-section of Nigerian civil society while in Niamey, she said. And this is my favorite quote. These are longtime friends of the United States. They are journalists. They are democratic advocates. They are human rights activists, she said. We had a frank exchange about the situation here.
Go home and get your fucking shine box.
Yeah, exactly. That's the treatment she was given. So I just want to repeat that: journalists, democratic advocates, human rights activists. That's how she described the allies in Niger from the coup government that she's going to bat for, or at least trying to go to bat for, while she's over there. Here's a clip from Ron Paul's podcast called The Liberty Report. His co-host Daniel McAdams describes what sounds a little bit more like the real reason for her visit and the real reason we are so interested in reinstating the old guard.
Coup in Niger a few days ago, and you say, well, it's a country and most people can't find it on the map. That's true. They do provide an enormous amount of uranium. I think they supply 40% of France's uranium, and France.
She didn't say anything about uranium in that quote. I didn't hear anything in that article about uranium.
Yeah,
she left that out.
Should have mentioned that. They're concerned about their constitutional rights, but it's funny, you have those kinds of issues all over Africa, and you never really see them get involved unless there are resources at stake.
Yeah, that is a pattern. All right, uranium, that's one.
It's been a big influence in Niger. It's a francophone country. But the U.S. also has a long interest there. We have at least 1,000 troops, probably closer to 2,000 troops.
Oh, I didn't hear her mention any of that either.
No.
Close to 2,000 troops in Niger. Okay, uranium, troops. All right, that's got to be everything, right?
We've built several major drone bases there, so we fly drones from Niger
okay, so
all around the
uranium,
region searching
troops,
for terrorists.
Drone bases searching for
terrorists. They continue to operate. We don't seem to be able to eradicate the terrorists, but it's a major interest for the U.S. So when there was a coup, and when we also trained their generals and their military officers. So when a coup came, and it was instigated by a group that included the leader who had been trained in the U.S. in special operations, well, the U.S. is starting to get concerned and starting to throw its weight around, literally and figuratively. And so what did they do? They sent in Victoria, blank the EU, Nuland.
Now it makes a little more sense.
Yeah. And something Greenwald got into, the Wall Street Journal did an article. The general that she met with was our man in Niger. He had been trained by the U.S. He was, he was our puppet, or that's so we thought. So the Wall Street Journal did a whole article about how this was really the unkindest cut of all. He pulled a Saddam. He basically told them to go fuck themselves after taking a lot of American support. This was the guy, when they were in Niger, they would have dinner at his house when American officials were there. And he said, when the Wall Street Journal asked him, what they would do about, losing U.S. aid, he said, well, that's the price for our freedom. So, they gained their freedom from France in 1960, but they never really got their freedom. The French have been deeply involved in their country ever since.
They bombed them after the coup, which, again, that sounds like something Putin would do.
Yeah, sounds very Putin-esque.
Yeah.
They have a very large nuclear power industry in France. Like, they need that uranium. I mean, it's about resources. And whenever it's about resources, just like Iraq, Kuwait, all this, they're gonna talk about human rights abuses. They're gonna talk about the Constitution. They're gonna talk about democratic rights. Now, there is a serious presence of Islamic insurgents in that region, and it's always difficult with these kinds of things. Like, I'm trying to get my news from non-U.S. sources. It's always hard to figure out what the non-propaganda is, but it seems like it is part of the reason they had this coup, was that the previous government was not able to contain terrorist attacks. And so they're turning to people they believe can better secure the country. Apparently, a lot of people are dying in these Islamic terrorist attacks, based on my research.
Well, yeah, shout out to Pasta and Fiorella Isabel for finding that Liberty Report clip, because that was very, very valuable, just to prove a sort of, as a counter to the CNN article, which, you read American press about this.
Right,
This is
right.
why you say you searched out
That's what's so
these sources,
difficult.
because you
Right.
would never, you would never find out. You would never find any of that out. And that's obviously just such operative and relevant information. This is why I said at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, this is why when the libs talk about whataboutism, right, when you start saying, well, we can't go all out against Putin, we can't punish Putin in the way that we might want to punish Putin, because if you do that, then you have to ask, well, what price should we pay for the crimes that we have committed? What crimes should France pay for their crimes? And they say, well, that's whataboutism. That's ridiculous.
It's different when we do it.
It's not whataboutism at all. It's about what kind of world you want to live in. Do you want to live in a world where every state that commits atrocities against other states is punished accordingly? In that kind of world, this country does not exist in the way it exists now. You're talking about a completely different universe. And so that's why I tried to make that point then, and the point obviously remains now.
Please clap.